All right, welcome to today's session. For today, we'll be doing service testing and integration testing. Ideally, within the service, we'll be doing unit testing, and then we'll be able to proceed and do controller testing, and that will be an integration test end to end. And we, at the end of it all, we'll be able to do code coverage using Jacoco, and we'll be able to report our coverage. So the concentration will be on the service layer today. So let's get started. Yesterday we had a chance to do the repository testing, whereby we had created a new file within the department hist repository, and we did set up our test using Testcontainers, and then we did auto configure database to replace none, and then we say that this is particularly a JPA tests, and we were able to ascertain that our MySQL container was running, and then for each particular test we are saving a particular department, and from there at the end of each test we are deleting all the entries from the department table. And then from there we did a test for finding a department by name, and also whenever we don't find the name, we are getting is not present being validated. So that ascertained that our repository find by department name was working okay. Now let's proceed and do testing for the service layer. So usually you'll be able to have an interface which you'll be able to have all your entries, and then from there you end up having the implementation. So ideally whenever you're doing the tests, you need to do the implementation testing, and for that particular scenario we are going to generate a test for this particular department service implementation class. Now to create the test, I'm going just to right click here, and then I'm going to go to test, or you can make use of the shortcut Control-Shift-T, and once you click that, then as generate tests, and then I'm going to make use of JUnit 5. Then automatically to read the package structure of your production code, and it will be able to create a new class which will be given by the name of your class followed by the test suffix, and that is what I'm going to generate, and click enter to confirm. Right, so for this case I'm going just to start select all the methods. We are going to write test for all the methods here, and I'm going to click OK. Right, you can see now our class has been generated within the package structure and service implementation folder, and we have a new class of within the test folder as department service implementation test. Now what you're going to do here, I'm going to disable tests one by one, so we're going to start with each particular test. So for now I'm going just to have a single annotation here as disable, to disable this particular test disabled. This is annotation and indicates to Spring Boot that we are not going to run this particular test. So whenever I run, I'm going to uncheck this particular test. Alright, so that's the first thing that I'm going to do. And now once we are done with a particular function, we'll be able to test each particular method. Now the next thing that we need to do is that within this particular department service, we have this particular constructor which takes in two arguments, one being the department repository, another one being the model mapper. So what you're going to do is going to be simple. We need to create the instances of the department repository and the model mapper, and to do that we are going to use ideally we're going to use the mocking or the Mockito framework to be able to have the department repository, because this particular class has already been tested. Now we need to also have this model mapper. For this model mapper, it's a bin, but then we can supply an actual instance of that particular model mapper class to this particular function. So in so doing, we are going to copy these two, bring them to the department service implementation test, paste them there, and remove the final keyword. Alright, so those are the two that we are going to have for this particular test. Alright, So the next thing, we just doing the setup for this particular class. So we need the department repository, and to have this one, we are going to make use of Mockito to mock this department repository, and we are going to make use of a simple annotation which is going to be at mock, coming from org.mockito. So I'm going to have that as a mock. Then for the model mapper, I can be able to create an instance of it directly by making use of new model mapper. All right. So that is the two sets that we are going to have here. All right. Now the next thing that you're going to do, we need to tell Spring Boot how it's going to run this particular class, and we are going to make use of the service layer. Usually we test using at extend with, and then we are going to make use of Mockito extension dot class. Right, so you want to annotate this one. I want to import this. Right, so this is the annotation that you're going to use on our service class, or the service implementation, to ensure that we have this mock generated, and then also we are going to have the model mapper. Now the next thing that we need the actual class which we are going to test, which holds the methods that we are going to test, and that particular class is going to be the department service implementation. So we need to create an instance of it, and what I'm going to do is just going to have private department service implementation, department service. So I'm going to just have it as implementation equal to I'm going just to have this a declaration, and then for each particular test I'm going to set this particular department service. So what I'm going to do, at before each, and then I'm going to have the setup. So we're going to set up the actual function, or the actual constructor, and this is going to be set up, and within this one we are going to have the department service implementation. We are going to create now an instance of that using the department repository, which is mocked, and the model mapper with instance. And that's how we'll be able to do the setup for this one, and that's all that we need to do for the actual setup. Now if we run this particular class, you'll be able to see that ideally all our tests should be able to run without any issue. Alright, so I'm going just to open the debug console. You can see that everything is actually green. Right, there is no test results, there is no all this. You can see that this particular method is actually green, and these other ones are actually disabled. Alright, so I'm going to clear this output from here. Then we need now to start focusing on creating a department. How do we create a department? So the first thing that you're going to do is to ascertain that this particular department service is not null. Alright, so I'm going just to ensure that the department service that we are having here is not actually null, but then that will be done automatically by this before each. Now let's go to the create department, whereby we'll be able to check what is the option, what do we require for the create department. So the first thing that we require a department request. Okay, we require a department request. So we need to build this particular payload that we need to set this function, and to do that we are going to quickly make use of the department request.builder, and then for creation we need just the department name. I'm going to create the department name being computer science. Alright, so with that I need to build this instance, and then from there I'm going to assign this one into a local variable of the department request. So the first thing is whenever we do the test, we just have when. Ideally I'm going just to give some comments. Whenever given, ideally we are going to given, and then whenever, when, and then lastly we are going to do the then. Right, what do we need to ascertain? So the first thing is given this department request, when we call, right, So when we call what? When we call the department service dot create department, and we supply the department request, what happens? Now we need to validate the return type of this one. All right, so what I'm going to do here is going to be simple. So to do this, we are just to have this one assigned to a local variable. So we need to hold this one department response. All right, so I'm going to have that particular department response. Now, given this, when we call department response or create department, we be able to get department response, and then from there we need now to verify that this particular department response will be able to contain the ID of the created department. All right, so what I'm going to do here is that I need to have, this is the actual, right, the value that we get from, which is the result, and then we need to have the actual. So what's our actual? We need to have our department response, the expectation. So we are going to have department response, expected response. So we need to have this. So we need to define our response, which is going to be department response dot builder dot department name is going to be the same name as computer science. We expect that to be computer science. Then we are going to also have, let me just push them down. We need to have the department number. All right, so I expect this one to be 1. All right, so I can have 1 and then dot build. Okay, so this is the response that we expect back. Okay, so looking at this, you can see that we have the department response, then builder, so department name and department number and all that. So let me just push also this one to be readable a bit. Okay, so as you can see, whenever we create, we're given this department, and then we call the function department service implementation, create the department with that particular request, we'll be expecting this one. But then we get this as the actual department response. Maybe I can just put it actual department response. So we need to validate and compare these two and ascertain that actually they are equal. So the first thing that you're going to do is going to be assert that. So I need to copy the assertions. So to do that, I'm going to make use of the import from AssertJ, which is going to be org static import. So I'm going to copy that up here within my class. So I'm going to have AssertJ, and then it's going to be a static import of our assertions within AssertJ. So I'm going to make use of assert that the actual department response dot get department number. First thing that we are going to validate is that it's not null. Is not null. All right, so it should be able to be a number. Then the second thing that we are going to assert is that it's going to be assert that the actual department response dot get department number, get department name should be equal to what we had as that is equal to, we need to ensure that it's equal to our expected response dot department response. So dot get department name. All right, so you have to ensure that our input and output should be the same. And then lastly, we are going to ascertain that whatever we get as the actual response, department response dot get department number should be equal to 1. Is equal to 1. All right, and this one, if I run this particular test, you'll be able to see that we haven't called the actual repository to test this one. So let me just run this particular test first, and then once it fails, then we'll be able to know what we expect to adjust. Right, as you can see, we wanted to have as you can see, the source cannot be null. Ideally, that is because our model was supplied with this particular department service implementation. You can see that whenever we tried to save, we had a null value. So we can't be able to model map that particular null value to this one. So we need to ensure that we are able to mock this particular department repository.save. So to do that, we are going to quickly close that. Now, whenever we call this one, right? So what we are going to do, again, we are going to have another mock. So we need to mock the repository there. And now we are going to say when, right? Whenever we have the department repository, then department repository dot save, right? So we are going to save what? We need to have the actual entity that we are going to save, right? So we need to have the actual entity that is going to be saved. Now, for this particular case, I'm going just to allow any class. I'm going just to make use of any object of which is going to be the department dot class. So any object of this particular, I need to import this any from Mockito ArgumentMatchers. So whenever I call the department repository save, then any object of the type of department I'm going to do, then I'm going to return we're going to return another department object. So I'm going just to return a department here, which is going to contain department.builder, right? Department name is going to be, I need to match this, what I'm going to expect. So in this case, I'm going to have the Department of Computer Science, and then let me just put it in a new line, and then we expect also to have, so we need to have this one department number. So it has to have a number in that we are able to save to the DB, and then from there build. All right. So I'm going to return this particular object whenever I get a call to the department repository to save an object of type department, then I'm going to return this particular department. Alright, so I'm going just to return this particular department with computer science as the name, and then department number being 1. Alright, so to quickly now run this particular object or tests, I'm going to run it again, and you'll be able to see to it that our test should be green. Alright, so you can see that is all that we do on the tests. And you can be able to see that now we have mocked the behavior of saving the value to the depository, so that we can now be able to ascertain that everything that we have here is actually working as expected. And now if I run this particular test with coverage, right, so if I go to the department service implementation, you can see that now the coverage will be able to indicate to you that this particular test has been done. Right, so this particular entire test or function is actually complete. Now let's do the second particular function for listing all the departments. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to minimize this create department, and I'm going to come and copy this up here, and we are going to create, and then from there we are into list. All right, so I'm going to remove now the disabled annotation. Now we are going to list this particular data. So what I'm going to do is going to be simple. We are going to have the whenever we are given that, all right, and then so we are going to have this. All right, so you're going to have that. Okay, and then what you're going to do is whenever we call ideally, so what you're going to do in listing, you're just going to do given and then when, right, and then you're going to do then. Right, so for this one, it's just going to be an actual call. So what you're going to do simply is going to be just having to ensure that we are able to call that particular function correctly. So to do that, we're just going to say the department service implementation dot list all. Right, so you're going to call this particular function, and then from there we need to verify that ideally that the particular repository was called, so that we were able to call the actual under the list all. You'll be able to see that now we are calling the find all method of the repository. So what we are going to do is verify that this particular method is actually called. Right, so to do that, I'm going to have this one as department repository dot find all. So that is to ensure that this particular method is actually called, and I can be able to show you how we can be able to have other assertions. As you can see that the list all function is actually called. All right.